Well, some of you might remember me, Thomas Droleskey, for many reasons. But some of you out there in TV land, to quote Edward Lillywhite Norton from The Honeymooners introducing the chef of the future, oh, great chef of the future. Some of you might remember me as the Lone Ranger of Shea Stadium off and on between May 4th, 1976, and the time I walked out of Shea Stadium during the fourth inning of a game between the then-named Florida Marlins and the New York Mets on Tuesday, July 16th, 2002, for a better part of 26 years. I used to wear a white hat, not this white hat, and a black mask, long since gone, to entertain fans at Shea Stadium. And what I've done recently, even though I no longer go to games and no longer support the game with my own money, is that I have written a massive expansion and revision of my earlier book, There Is No Cure for This Condition, discussing the first 15 seasons of the Mets and my own involvement at Shea Stadium in '76, when my act, which began as a one-day lark, commenced and took off and was accepted by the fans, which is the only reason why I kept it up over the years, because of the fan reaction, something I never understood but accepted as such. And the new book is called Meeting the Mets, a quirky history of a quirky team, written obviously by a quirky man. And in this new book, I have attempted to capture the spirit of the innocence and indeed the joy of those early seasons. The book is a 2-volume project. Volume 1 is ready for purchase now on Amazon Kindle, and is also ready to be purchased through Gildan Edge Publishing as a print-on-demand book. Meeting the Mets, a quirky history of a quirky team. 336 pages of fun-filled, action-packed narratives of various games and events and personalities, and as well as some insights drawing upon what I know to be true as a Catholic, trying to keep into perspective that which was once a legitimate diversion, baseball, although it has always been a business, but never more so than today. And what the book tries to do is to capture the spirit of the innocence of those early years, those 1962 Mets. This 2012 is the 50th anniversary of the Mets' first season back in 1962. I was then 10 and a half. I'm now 60 and a half. Yeah, they say I have less hair, and that the hair is a different color. They say it's white. I don't see it, but they say it is. My wife and daughter say it's white. It must be white. But those early years, that first year, they lost 120 out of the 160 games that they played. It was an old line, probably apocryphal, but borrowed from the Brooklyn Dodgers of the 1930s, the Daffy Dodgers of the 30s, when they were managed by Casey Stengel, the first manager of the Mets, and the famous manager of the New York Yankees between 1949 and 1960, Charles Dillon, the old Professor Stengel. A famous line that a man arrived late at the Polo Grounds in 1962, and he was told that the Mets had 3 men on base, and his response was, "Which one?" Because it wasn't uncommon for the Mets to have 3 men on base at the same base at the same time. I saw it happen once at the Polo Grounds. I saw at least 2 men. Actually, I'll check that, as Jerry Coleman would say. Those of you who don't know who Jerry Coleman was, check that. I should say, said by Ralph Kiner. That's inside baseball stuff for those who follow baseball. The rest of you, I'm sorry, you're not going to get it. But I saw 2 men on the same base, and I think it was the top of the 14th inning, bottom of the 14th inning, which in a game the Mets won, the most exciting game I've ever seen in person. I've seen a lot of games, over 1,600 games in person, at the Polo Grounds, the former Polo Grounds, the former Shea Stadium now, and many other ballparks around the nation. Mets came from behind. They were tied 4-4 through 9 innings, and then the top of the 14th inning, Billy Williams, the Hall of Famer for the Chicago Cubs, hit a line drive to left field, a sinking line drive to left field that the great Catholic Frank Thomas, who's still alive, the Frank Thomas, not the fellow who played for the Chicago White Sox, and I think for the Oakland Athletics. Yeah, he was all right. But we're talking about the Frank Thomas of the old Pittsburgh Pirates, who was actually a novice for the Carmelite Fathers at one point, before he decided he did not have a vocation to the priesthood. I believe his son, though, is a priest. And but Frank Thomas playing left field, he played a variety of positions. Frank Thomas did left field, third base, sometimes even first base, I believe. But Frank Thomas tried to make a shoestring catch. The ball went under his glove to the left field wall of the old Polo Grounds. I think there was that old Bardell sign out there, all of those wonderful signage of the Polo Grounds, and it was inside the park, 2-run home run. And as a then 11-and-a-half-year-old, I was despondent. Oh no, the Mets are actually going to lose a ball game in person. I had never seen that before. I had been to some games at the Polo Grounds, but I had never seen them lose. Oh no, oh no. But sure enough, in the bottom of the 14th, they actually got the bases loaded into one time. They had the 2 men on the base, and then Tim Harkness, who coaches, I think, a semi-pro team or an independent league team up in Toronto now, but Tim Harkness from Canada, who could have been a professional hockey player, but Tim Harkness came up, a first baseman, met a number of first basemen that year. Marv Throneberry had been released earlier that year, Marvelous Marv, and of course Ed Kranepool was being shuttled then between Buffalo and the Buffalo Bison's minor league team and the Mets, and they had a number of first base, but Tim Harkness came up in the bottom of the 14th, 3-2 count, 2 out. Bases loaded. What's going to happen? Will he strike out? Will he line out? What will happen? He had a line drive to right field. Lou Brock, playing for the Cubs. Lou Brock was a Cub before he was a Cardinal. He traded to the Cardinals in '64. One of the worst trades the Chicago Cubs ever made. Had a line drive. Lou Brock leapt, but sorry, Lou, you weren't that tall. It went into the second deck of the 2-deck stadium, the Polo Grounds, a grand slam home run. And Tim Harkness won the game for the Mets that year. In fact, I'm looking here. Here it is, right here. Here's Harkness after the game in the center field clubhouse of the Polo Grounds. Those of you who are old enough will recall that the clubhouses in the Polo Grounds were about 500 feet from home plate in center field, not under the stands as they are now. And there he is after the game as the fans are celebrating what was then a rare feat, a Mets victory. In fact, there's an old line on the Get Smart pilot show in 1965. The chief played by the late Ed Plateau, the late Don Adams, playing Agent 86 Maxwell Smart. All right, Max. You're going to meet Agent 99, played by Barbara Feldon, who I believe will be 71 this year. Don't you love all of these facts? Anyhow, you're going to meet her at LaGuardia Airport, and she is going to have a newspaper with an improbable headline. You'll be able to recognize her immediately. All right, Chief, what's the headline? Mets win doubleheader, the chief said. Well, of course, Get Smart, written by Mel Brooks and Buck Henry. It just happened so in the plot line, everybody at the airport had the newspaper, Mets win doubleheader, because they actually had won a doubleheader. But the Mets actually won a game, one of 51 that they won that year, so they were better by 11 games in 1963 as opposed to 1962. But the book tries to capture this spirit. And so you want play-by-play for a game like that? Anybody can write books about the 69 and 86 World Series and National League Championships. I got detail about that. But where else are you gonna find first-hand detail about the game of June 26, 1963? I mean, where are you gonna find that detail, ladies and gentlemen? And I also happen to have been at the All-Star game back in July 7th, 1964. I believe it was July 7th, 1964. There it is right there. July 7th, 1964. Oh, smoky, Rocky. July 7th, 1964. Don't know my own strength. Anyhow, I was actually at that game. In fact, we lived in Great Neck at that time, prior to 39 Kings Point Road, prior to moving to the wonderful oasis of 234 Laurel Cove Road in Oyster Bay Cove, from which I never wanted to leave. And I love and pray for my late parents, pray for their immortal souls, but somehow perhaps I will never forgive them for leaving Oyster Bay Cove. But anyhow, it was an easy train trip. 15 minutes, you get on the train, the Kings Point, the Port Washington line, you're right at the World's Fair Center, World Fair Station, and I was walking to the game with my scorebook, one of these scorebooks, and the old C.S. Peterson Scoremaster scorebook, and for those out there in TV land, a woman said to me, because the World Fair was going on at that time as well, is, little boy, you're going the wrong way for the World's Fair. And I said, Madam, I am going to the All-Star Game. Thank you very much. And this was the only All-Star Game ever hosted at Shea Stadium. The second one evidently will be hosted, the second one hosted by the Mets will be at Citi Field, which has been in operation since 2009, in 2013, next year. But the All-Star Game was an exciting one. I sat in the right field stands on the field level and saw Johnny Callison's game-winning home run sail over my head into the loge level, in which the game-winning home run, in fact, it was the only walk-off home run, if I'm not mistaken, in All-Star Game history, the last one in All-Star Game history. There hasn't been one since, although I could be corrected on that. There's a great deal of detail about that, as well as other games that don't really matter. Of course, none of this matters in the scheme of your particular judgment. But if you're concerned about the Mets and concerned about baseball, I mean, these games really don't matter, but what I'm attempting to do is to capture the heart and soul of what it was like to be a fan in those early years. So Volume 1 covers between 1962 and 1986. Action-packed adventures with some personal reminiscences and observations about the state of the game. For example, back in 1990, Ron Darling, who was a very good pitcher for the New York Mets, I understand he's a very good announcer. I don't watch the games. I don't have television. I used to be a television addict. I gave it up. And you can too as well. Just a little editorial. But back in 1990, during a player strike, or I think it was the owner's lockout, the players received $5,000 royalty money out of the royalties of the sale of the items associated with baseball, the shirts, the jerseys, the caps, and the caps and whatever else, all the memorabilia. And Ron Darling got a check for $5,000, as the other players did. And Ron Darling said, $5,000, that's dog track money. The time being rather underemployed, as an adjunct professor, I said to myself, Ron, when I saw that in the New York Times, that's in the book, I wouldn't mind having some dog track money. I think, players being paid $5 million to throw a spherical object 90 feet, pitchers, and pitching only one inning, let's say, and have an ERA of over 5 is a little exorbitant, a little extravagant, but I will make observations like that now and again. But it's a fun book. It's some serious observations, but it's a fun book. And unfortunately, I can't include, because of copyright laws, a lot of these things in a lot of the photos that are here in the book, but I do have a lot of other memorabilia, my own personal memorabilia here.